Hello boys and girls, today I'm going to show you the next steps for your clay bobblehead. After you have your cone shape created for the body and the pinch pot created for the head, you are ready to start adding some details. Some of you may have already started experimenting with details, but what you want to keep in mind is you need to have additive design or additive sculpture, which is where you take pieces of clay and you score and slip them on. And you also need to have subtractive design, and that is where you take away the clay and carve details into your bobblehead. As you're working with your clay, think about your character or your animal and what features would actually be sticking off of the face and protruding off of the head and off of the body. So for example, if you have a nose, most creatures' noses come off of the face. And so what you can do is either take your clay and you can pinch sections. My clay is a little bit dry, but if I want to create a face, what I can do is pinch and press in eye sockets. And then you can, or I can kind of carve them in. And then I can pinch out sections for the nose. Creating an eye socket is going to be helpful because it gives a place for the eyeball to go. Just like we have skulls that have eye sockets where our eyes fit in, most creatures do as well. That way their eyes don't look like they're bugging out. So you can carve eye sockets or just push in the clay. Mine's a little bit dry, that's why I have to carve some clay out. And then I can also take the clay and start pinching a nose as well. I am just demonstrating. I'm not exactly sure what this creature will be. I guess I'll decide that as I'm going, which will be fun. If you are adding eyes, start with carving out your eye sockets with subtractive sculpture. And then you can roll 2 little balls of clay, and you can take more clay if you need clay. And I suggest rolling 2 balls of clay before you attach them onto the head. Roll them at the same time so you can make sure they're the same size. So that looks pretty good. And remember, anytime you add clay to clay, you need to score. That's just roughing up the surface of the clay on both surfaces. I'm going to score my eyeballs. You can kind of poke holes too to rough it up. And then add water, which creates a liquid clay, which is called slip. And I'm just going to wiggle those in and squish them down. There, now I have eyeballs that don't bug out of the face, but you can still see that there's an edge that show where the eyeball is, and it creates sort of an eye socket. Makes it look a little bit more realistic and believable. So here's my creature so far. With the eyeball, I added clay, but now I might want to poke pupils into the eyes to make it a little bit more realistic looking. You can see that now it gives it a little bit of life, just poking the pupil in. And the pupil, since you're poking it in, it has more of a shadow, so it looks darker, just like our pupils are black. And I have the start of a nose here. I'm not exactly sure what animal this is going to be, but what I'm going to do is just shape a triangle shape for the nose. Sometimes noses have a middle section and then they have 2 balls on the sides. You could do that if you want more of a human nose. You have the 2 nostrils on the side. The goal is to work off of your sketch to make sure it looks like your sketch. So here's kind of a nose shape that I could use. And what I'm going to do is score and slip it onto here, or I'm going to add some clay. Anytime you add clay, you have to score and slip. Otherwise, your pieces might fall off. Also, if you have air trapped in between the clay, an air pocket, the air has to escape somehow, and when it's fired, it becomes steam. The air molecules move around really fast, and it will explode. So here's kind of my nose shape that I'm starting. When you're working with clay, don't get frustrated if you add clay and it doesn't look quite right, because what you can do is after you add clay, then you can refine and carve out your details. So don't be frustrated if it doesn't look exactly how you want it right away. It's better to have more clay, and then you can carve clay away to get the shape that you want. So I'm going to turn it to the side, see how the side looks. I'm going to make the nose a little bit smaller. Kind of looks like a goofy cartoon, that's okay. So there we have the start of additive and subtractive design. And you can see from the side profile, I'm starting to get some shape to the face because we want to be able to look at all the sides and see the detail and the dimension. There's my nose, and don't forget about your nostrils. Oops. That's important too. You can just pick his nose. Right, so whether you have a beak or a trunk or some sort of other type of animal nose, you'll want to do the same concept and just add clay and then carve away the details, refine the shapes. And once the clay hardens a little bit, it will be a little bit easier to sculpt things because the clay won't be quite as mushy. For the hair, I don't want you just to carve detail into the hair unless it's a very short, like stubble. Some of you were poking texture into the cheek and the chin. That's okay, but if you have hair, your hair comes off of your skull, so what you'll want to do is actually score and slip. So I'm just going to score a little portion of the hair on here. And I'm going to take a flattened piece of clay. Oops, I just squished his eyeball. Score. If it's softer, you don't quite have to score as much. Add the water. And add clay on first, and then you can carve your detail. That way it looks like the hair actually has some volume to it. So then you can carve your subtractive sculpture on top once you have some thickness of hair to work with. For the mouth, mainly what you'll want to do is carve a hole or a line and then push up if you want him to have a bigger mouth. And you can pry this part down. And then you can add clay on for the lips if you'd like to. But just by slicing a little bit, oops, and curving it up, you can get some of your detail with your mouth with mostly subtractive design, but then you can add the lip. If you add a little bit of a coil here and here, you can make that a little bit thicker. I have an interesting character happening here. I'm going to add some eyebrows. And don't forget about the body. A couple things you want to keep in mind when you're adding arms and legs and detail onto the body is that if you roll a coil for an arm, and you want to score and slip it on, actually with the arm, what I do to make a hand is I just smush the end of my coil and then I just cut slits for the fingers. So if you look at this, I just go slice, slice, maybe he only has 3 fingers, and then I just spread out each little piece and curve it a little bit. That way I have my hand. So start out with a ball at the end of your coil and then cut the slits, and then you can adjust the shape. So you don't have to add clay on for each finger. Just cut it apart with what you need. As you're scoring and slipping onto your body, keep in mind, if I just score and slip this arm, and I have it sticking straight out, it has a very, very strong chance of it falling off or breaking. So please do not just score and slip arms that go straight out. You could have them on the side. You could even have them come out and bend at the elbow and then reattach and re-score and slip it onto the side. And then you can blend them together. But make them thick and make them sturdy so that they will not break off easily. Same thing with the tail. Don't just have the tail coming straight off. If you have the tail come out and then wrap back around and reattach to the body, that is the safest way to ensure that things don't break off. So if I scored and slipped this on, I wouldn't want to just keep the tail like this. I would want to wrap it back around and score and slip it back to my creature so that it has two areas that are attached. Keep in mind that as you're creating your pieces should not be thicker than your thumb. And if it is, you should make sure you hollow it out. So I've hollowed pieces, and you can again continue to test and improve your shapes to make sure they bobble. And as they become more leather hard, it is easier and they're more sturdy and hold their shape better. Have fun adding additive and subtractive design to make your bobblehead come to life.